It was Easter Sunday and the first day of Passover. A mob tore through a Jewish neighborhood in the Russian Empire. Homes were looted, women violated, children murdered. The police stood by and did nothing. The carnage lasted for 2 days. In a nearby city, a young Jewish writer read the headlines and came to a devastating realization. The dream of assimilation was a lie. Decades before the Holocaust, he accurately predicted that Europe would grow increasingly dangerous for the Jews. The lesson he learned from the bodies in the street was that from now on, Jews must be able to fight back, and that they would never be safe without a country of their own. He dedicated the rest of his life to Zionism. But unlike other Zionist thinkers, he insisted that a Jewish state would never be born through diplomacy alone. What was needed was military strength. To his critics, he was a dangerous extremist who believed in power over peace. But to his followers, he was a pragmatist who accepted the world's ugly, inconvenient truths. So who was Ze'ev Jabotinsky? A reckless firebrand or a prophetic visionary? Ze'ev Jabotinsky was shaken to his core by the Kishinev Pogrom. He refused to accept a world where Jews were helpless against such atrocities. Back in his hometown of Odessa, he helped organize a secret Jewish self-defense group. Why secret? Because this was Tsarist Russia, and you could just organize your own militia. If the authorities found out, Jabotinsky could have been arrested, imprisoned, even exiled to Siberia. But local defense wasn't enough for Jabotinsky. He was thinking bigger. He wanted a Jewish state. He threw himself into the Zionist movement, which was also risky under Tsarist Russia. And when World War I broke out, he saw a rare opportunity. At the time, Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. But when the Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of Germany, Jabotinsky made a bold prediction. If the Allies won, the Ottoman Empire would collapse, and Palestine would end up under British control. And that could change everything for Zionism. Jabotinsky left Russia and spent the next 4 years pushing for a Jewish fighting force, a military unit that could help the British defeat the Ottomans and earn the Jews a place in the future of Palestine. It was a hard sell. Why would the British want Jewish soldiers? Who would the Jews really be loyal to? Could Jews even fight? But Jabotinsky persisted. He lobbied hard until the British finally agreed to form the Jewish Legion, a battalion of Jewish volunteers. In 1918, the Legion landed in Palestine. Soon after, World War I ended, and just as Jabotinsky had predicted, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. Palestine came under British control, opening a new chapter for the Zionist movement. But the fight for a Jewish state was just getting started. In the years after the war, many Zionist thinkers believed in diplomacy, that the best way forward was to work with the British, slowly and carefully towards statehood. Jabotinsky disagreed. He believed that Jewish self-defense had to remain front and center, especially with growing tensions between Jews and Arabs, which he believed were only going to escalate. In April 1920, Jabotinsky's fears came true. A wave of Arab riots broke out in Jerusalem, fueled by anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic rhetoric by the future Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Jewish neighborhoods were attacked, shops and homes were looted, and the British in charge did very little to protect the Jews. Jabotinsky refused to let the horrors of Russia repeat themselves in the Middle East. He helped form a local defense force, an early version of what would later become the Haganah. Most of the defenders had little more than sticks and clubs, but under Jabotinsky's leadership, they managed to hold off rioters in the outskirts of Jerusalem. Jabotinsky's force then tried to enter the Jewish quarter in the Old City, but the British soldiers blocked their path. The quarter was left defenseless. By the end of the riots, 6 Jewish lives were lost, and hundreds were wounded. Then came the crackdown. The British arrested dozens to restore order. Not only the rioters, but the Jewish defenders too. 19 Jews were charged with illegal possession of 5 guns and 250 bullets. When Jabotinsky found out, he went straight to the police. He claimed full responsibility and demanded they arrest him too. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Husseini, on the other hand, was sentenced to 10, but went into hiding and never served a single day. Jabotinsky only ended up serving 3 months after widespread protests led to his release. But the experience left its mark. It hardened his belief that Jews would never be safe if they relied on others to protect them. By 1920, Jabotinsky had become one of the most visible and most controversial leaders in the Zionist movement. He was admired for his eloquence and clarity, but feared for his bluntness and militancy. He openly rejected the cautious diplomatic approach embraced by leaders like Chaim Weizmann and David Ben-Gurion. They believed Zionism could advance gradually by earning the trust of the British, and they predicted that the local Arabs would come to see Jewish immigration as a benefit, bringing modern medicine, agriculture, and industry that raised the standard of living for everyone. But Jabotinsky believed that this was a dangerous illusion. Instead of trying to please the British and the Arabs, he argued that the only way forward was to create facts on the ground, a strong Jewish majority capable of defending itself. Once that strength existed, he believed peace would eventually follow. To advance his vision, Jabotinsky broke from the mainstream Zionist movement and founded his own political faction, known as Revisionist Zionism. It emphasized nationalism, free markets, and above all, security. The ideological battle lines were now clear. And in 1923, he put his beliefs into writing in one of the most controversial essays in Zionist history, The Iron Wall. In it, Jabotinsky called for massive Jewish immigration into the region to achieve a Jewish majority, with the ultimate goal of establishing a state where Arabs and Jews can, quote, live together in peace like good neighbors. He made clear that he didn't want to expel the Arabs or deny them equal rights, but he believed peaceful coexistence couldn't come through negotiation, at least not yet. It would only become possible once the Arabs accepted that Jewish presence in the land was permanent and unshakable. Quote, there can be no voluntary agreement between ourselves and the Palestine Arabs. It is utterly impossible to obtain the voluntary consent of the Palestine Arabs for converting Palestine from an Arab country into a country with a Jewish majority. To be honest, some of the language in this essay doesn't age well. He refers to the Arabs as natives and Jews as colonizers, writing, quote, every native population in the world resists colonists as long as it has the slightest hope of being able to rid itself of the danger of being colonized. And that, quote, Zionist colonization must either stop or else proceed regardless of the native population, which means that it can proceed and develop only under the protection of a power that is independent of the native population, behind an iron wall which the native population cannot breach. It's raw, even unsettling, but to Jabotinsky, this wasn't about replacement or domination. It was about realism, facing the conflict head-on, without illusions. Today, these quotes are often cited by anti-Zionists to demonize Jabotinsky and delegitimize the State of Israel. But we also have to ask, are we hearing them through modern ears? To understand what the Iron Wall was really saying, we need to go back to its original context. Was Jabotinsky describing colonization, or was he pushing back against anti-immigration? Take a look at this line, for example. The Zionists want only one thing, Jewish immigration. And this Jewish immigration is what the Arabs do not want. For many Arabs in Palestine, Zionism looked like colonialism, foreigners coming from Europe to build a new society. Look a little closer, and you see refugees returning to the very land their ancestors were displaced from. In other words, Jabotinsky may not have been justifying colonization as we understand it today. He was describing a hard truth. Whether you see them as immigrants or settlers, the local Arab population was deeply opposed to their desire to create a Jewish state. That opposition was not going to change because of new ideas, technologies, and opportunities, which was the mainstream Zionist view. Seeing Arab resistance to Jewish immigration, Jabotinsky predicted violence. And when that violence came, he believed Jews would need the power to protect themselves. They would need an iron wall. In Jabotinsky's view, Jews had to be strong enough to force peace. Yes, he saw the irony and leaned into it. He believed that only once the Arabs realized they couldn't drive the Jews out by force, they would finally accept a Jewish state, one that guaranteed equal rights for Arabs and Jews. As he put it, quote, the only way to reach an agreement in the future is to abandon all idea of seeking an agreement at present. Jabotinsky's essay shocked the Zionist establishment. He was accused of fueling extremism, playing into Arab fears, and undermining the fragile diplomatic efforts with the British. The rift between Jabotinsky and his fellow Zionists grew into a chasm. He became bitter rivals with David Ben-Gurion and built an entirely separate political movement, one that would reshape Zionism from the outside. As the 1920s wore on, the divide between Jabotinsky and the Zionist mainstream continued to deepen. Tensions with the Arabs of Palestine escalated, and violence broke out repeatedly. The British, too, grew wary of Jabotinsky's confrontational approach. Then came the riots of 1929, sparked by disputes over the Western Wall, which Jabotinsky's followers were a part of. Arab mobs attacked Jewish communities across Palestine, ending the lives of 133 Jews and wounding hundreds more. Some might say the growing violence vindicated Jabotinsky's foresight. To others, it it was proof that his militancy fueled the tensions, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mainstream Zionist leaders still hoped that cooperation with the British and moderation towards Arab leaders could avert disaster. But Jabotinsky saw the riots as confirmation of what he had been saying all along. Jews would survive only by relying on their own strength. He used his growing influence to hammer both the British and Zionist leaders, accusing them of clinging to illusions that were costing Jewish lives. To the British, Jabotinsky became a public enemy. They accused him of inciting Arab anger and blamed him personally for growing unrest. So when he left for a speaking tour in South Africa, the British seized their chance. They officially banned him from returning to Mandatory Palestine. He never set foot in the Holy Land again. Even in exile, he refused to stop fighting. By this point, the Russian Empire had become the Soviet Union, a communist regime that banned Zionist activity. Jabotinsky's message couldn't reach the millions of Jews still trapped behind its borders, so he focused his efforts on the rest of Eastern Europe. He traveled relentlessly across Europe, warning Jews to leave before it was too late. To Jabotinsky, the rise of fascism and anti-Semitism wasn't just a political crisis, it was an existential one. Emigration to Palestine wasn't about ideology anymore, it was about survival. He famously warned, "Eliminate the diaspora, or the diaspora will eliminate you." In 1936, Jabotinsky proposed a bold plan: evacuate 1.5 million Jews from Poland and other Eastern European countries to Palestine within 10 years. He believed that if enough Jews escaped Europe, the remaining population would be too small to remain a target for widespread anti-Semitism. But his plan was rejected. Many Zionist leaders saw him as an alarmist and dangerous. Instead, they remained focused on careful diplomacy and quiet immigration under British quotas. Then came 1939. The British issued the White Paper, what Jabotinsky saw as the ultimate betrayal. It slashed Jewish immigration to Palestine to just 75,000 over 5 years, and happened at the worst possible time. Hitler was rising, and war was on the horizon. With Jewish lives at stake and the gates to Palestine closing, he and his revisionist network launched a new mission, Aliyah, an underground operation to smuggle Jews into Palestine in defiance of British law. While on a speaking tour in New York, Jabotinsky died suddenly of a heart attack. He was only 59 years old. Sadly, he died before he could see the creation of the Jewish state he had fought so hard for his entire life. But his ideas didn't die with him. In the years that followed, the Holocaust made his warnings look tragically prophetic. His followers formed underground militias like the Irgun, which resisted British rule in Palestine. One of those followers was Menachem Begin, a fiery young leader who would go on to command the Irgun and eventually become Israel's 6th prime minister. Jabotinsky's ideology has shaped Israeli politics to this day. His unapologetic belief in Jewish self-defense helped forge the identity of the Israeli right. His legacy lives on not only through the Likud party, which traces its roots directly to his movement, but in the streets of Israel. Almost every major city has a street named after Ze'ev Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky helped shatter the old stereotype of the Jew as a passive victim. He vowed to make sure Jews could protect themselves. He believed in security through strength and refused to rely on diplomacy for protection. When you look at Israel's stunning military operations throughout its history, it's easy to see a reflection of Jabotinsky's legacy. The Iron Wall he envisioned is still standing, stronger than ever. He was mocked as a warmonger, pushed aside by his own movement. He remains a villain to some, and a hero to others. But in many ways, the modern state of Israel stands on the foundations he poured: iron, unyielding, and built to last.